special guest is Nate Green from the Montrose Group LLC. This is for council discussion. No action will be taken. Right at this moment, we're waiting for the administration to come back with the guy. We hope he made it to Greenville.
So we don't know, huh?
We don't know, but we are in session on time.
Okay.
That way, when Mr. Burkett calls to check in, I can tell him what we did.
Evidently not much.
They are.
Maybe this guy.
Eric, he called to tell me he was having seared tuna, scallops, and shrimp tonight.
It's big of him.
I thought
Gonna
so.
be bigger after he eats that.
All fresh. I didn't ask if he was gonna, fix it in period costume with period equipment, but
Been nicer if he shared.
go ahead.
Well, he could put it in one of those freezer boxes and mail it to us.
I'd rather go there and eat it. They showed on the news last night.
Yeah.
Somebody was coming back from Maine and they had this 22-pound lobster. It was huge in their luggage, and they just took it out just to take a picture and show it. Because you can bring that back, but
Did it die?
no.
I'm hearing something. Go ahead.
No, it was just huge.
Oh.
I've got a college buddy that lives in Maine, and I've gone there several times, and I always come back with lobster.
I thought
It's
maybe
like
it got
$5.
somebody.
No, but it was, the claws on that thing were like, they were huge.
Oh, I bet. 22 pounds.
Wait until after I've talked to Roxanne.
That's a big booger.
That's the answer.
I'd call it dinner and lunch. There'd be leftovers.
And breakfast.
Yeah.
So basically.
Okay, we got any entertainment?
So we have down
You
there
are our entertainment.
existing areas, and that's historic. I could take it.
Huh? Do a little jig?
House.
You just pulled in.
I have no reason why.
Ah.
We're in session, we're just waiting.
John's fixing to do a jig for us.
Library and such.
Entertain us.
Wow.
Yeah, that big house.
Yeah.
One with the red door, from the Catholic Church is this. Can't call it what it is. Bridge.
I was supposed to be.
Museum. Lansdowne House.
Like, worry about it.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Tracy, are you gonna run the camera?
Yeah.
Camera gonna be on?
No.
It is.
That
think
camera
so.
is. Work session.
YouTube is.
We're in session, so Kurt, if you want to start, go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Green can get his breath. And
Yeah. Well, good evening, everyone. The purpose of this evening's council meeting is to talk about a redevelopment district. Redevelopment districts, it's a new piece of legislation that was enacted by our state legislature last September, as we discussed at a previous council meeting. The redevelopment district, it is necessary for this district to be tied to a historical building that is either a part of a historical district or as individually listed on the historical register. These areas that, if established, can be no larger than 10-acre tracts. And as a municipality, we are able to have as many of those tracts as possible. So in a map that Mr. Oliver's looking at right now, Chad Henry and myself, we sat down and we designated where those historical buildings or districts were located. And then we'll continue to work with Nate if this council approves or wishes to move forward in establishing those districts which will be the most beneficial to the areas within the city that can be redeveloped, whether it's bare ground or older buildings that can be remodeled. So with all that being said, I won't steal his thunder. You caught your breath yet? You good?
I don't think I have anything left to say, though. I mean, you covered it all.
All right. Did you have any additional literature to bring with you to pass out?
I mean, I have a PowerPoint I can go through.
Okay.
You tell me.
I would say we're all kind of visual people, so
Okay,
if you...
I hope I think I brought it.
before we start, Leon, you want to identify or Kurt, can you identify which properties are being discussed here? That
It's not really
I know, but
specific
you have
properties.
some highlighted that we.
I don't have that map with me. It was a map that I gave all the council members at a prior meeting. They were highlighted.
I know.
You guys can pass that one around.
There were
if you
buildings
wanna look at it.
downtown, there was the St. Clair.
But you gotta understand, the entire downtown
Is,
is a historical district,
Right.
so it's all included. And we can branch
Branch
off
off.
of that,
but then
okay?
you had the Lansdowne House, the St. Clair, the
Mausoleum.
Mausoleum, the bridge on Broadway,
There's
Garth Museum,
I don't know if that's enough or not.
Yeah.
a property on Washington Avenue, a property on 4th Street and Vine and, a couple others there, but that just gives some ideas.
Is that the same one?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what you have in front of you, thanks for the invite to come to your meeting tonight, council members. What I put together here, this is a PowerPoint that I wanted to go through just about downtown development districts. Kurt talked about them already, and I think he did a great job of describing what they are. But we have, I'm Nate Green with the Montrose Group. The first slide there that you have, that is really us and what we do. We are an economic development consulting firm based in Columbus. We do 4 things. One of the things we do the most of and we're most proud of and passionate of is economic development strategic plans. This DRD, the Downtown Redevelopment District, fits within that. We also do lobbying, we do public finance and incentives for companies, and we do marketing and communications as well. The second slide there is, that just shows some of the plans we've done. We've done strategic plans for Delaware County, Athens County. We have done downtown redevelopment district plans for the city of Portsmouth. Kurt talked about having more than one DRD in Portsmouth. We did 4 different DRDs because it's a large downtown and they have a lot of historic structures they want to redo, so we did more than one there. We did one for the village of Utica, which is a small place in Licking County. That's one on their main street. It's where Velvet Ice Cream is, if you've ever been there. Oh, yeah. We did one for the city of Circleville, which is just directly south of Columbus. If you go 20 miles south of the State House, you're in Circleville. We are right now working with the city of Logan in Hocking County. Where the Hocking Hills is. We're doing a downtown redevelopment district plan there, and we're also working with Hillsborough over in Highland County on a DRD plan. We are also working with the Columbus area performing arts. They own the theaters in Columbus, so the Ohio Theater and Palace Theater. We're creating a theater district using the DRD as a way to help them restore those theaters and do some things there. So what I want to do is a little bit just go. I won't go through these point by point, but I really wanted to just talk about the DRD, why it would be great for Greenville, and how we can help. The page number 4, Kurt really talked about these, but I think the value of what these are historic preservation redevelopment tools. It's called a downtown redevelopment district. It doesn't have to be in a downtown, but that's what the program is called. They are 10-acre districts. They are continuous districts, not contiguous. So what that means, and I think the map that maybe you saw as an idea of that is continuous is the properties don't have to be right beside each other. We can use an anchor of a structure and then use public right-of-way to get to the next structure and go on to create a district based on where the historic structure is and really based on where we want to center development. The downtown redevelopment district is like a tax increment finance district, if you're familiar with that. What it does is it takes the increase in property taxes in the area and it redirects it into funding of historic structures, redevelopment of historic structures, either historic buildings, either through loans or grants. It is funding for historic preservation groups, or it can be for a community improvement corporation. You have one here in Greenville that could be used for. It can be used for public infrastructure. And then it says for tech corridors there, but I don't think that qualifies here because we need to have 100 gigabytes of speed, of internet speed, and I don't think we have that here. All of these plans must have an economic development plan, and I'll talk about that and what we do. But that economic development plan, as I talked about, that's what our firm gets involved in. We do a couple of things, and I'll talk about this, but we do, as part of the DRDs, we do a parcel analysis. So we work with you to figure out what the map's going to look like, where the DRD should be, whether you should have 1 DRD, 4 DRDs, 10, whatever the number is, to encourage development, encourage incentivize capital investment in the area. So we work with you on the economic development plan, and then we also work with you on the enabling legislation, the ordinances to get these DRDs in place. If you go to the next slide, there's a we have come up with a 6-step process. The first is historic preservation certification of sites. You've talked about a few of those already. You have several on the National Register of Historic Places. You have a downtown that is an historic area, so either one of those will work. Either one or both of those will work for the DRD. We have the DRD Economic Development Plan. We adopt the DRD financial model. The model is essentially looking at that area, those DRD plans, those DRD areas and parcels, and saying, okay, what's there today? What's the tax revenue that's being generated today? What investments might be coming? And so what can we expect? What revenues can we expect to come out of the DRD? We do the 5th step is the ordinance and public hearing. Just like most things you do, you have to, the city council has the power to enact these DRDs and put these in place. You have to have a public hearing 30 days ahead of time, so we do that, and we work with you on that. And then if there are going to be individual agreements with building owners, developers, and those kind of things, we will work with you on those as well. But that's a 6-step process. If you go through, I'm gonna skip number 6. I already kind of talked about it, but that's the DRD historic certification process. The next slide really goes into how we get value, how we get. If you go to slide 7, how we get revenues out of the DRD. I talked about it. We look at a building investment. It's either a building investment or just a rise in property values from a building. So we have a building investment. There's going to be an increase in building value. That increase in building value is going to cause an increase in property tax. We take 70% of that new property tax and it goes into the DRD. And then we take that new property tax and we use it for the DRD uses of funds. So the next slide is those things that I talked about, the DRD uses of funds. The first is rehab of historic structures. So those buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Places, or even those that potentially are in your historic district, you can make grants and loans to the owners of those buildings to rehab those buildings. So if you have the building where the Dark County Economic Development Group is in, that's a building that's already been redone. But if the DRD had been in place when that building before it had been redone, we could have gone to the building owner and said, okay, you're going to rehab that building, you're going to spend X amount of dollars, that's going to generate so much revenue over the next 10 years. Either you will get that money from a bank up front, or maybe the city would give the owner of that building the money up front, and they use that money to rehab the building. So we're using it as an incentive to the building owner to redo their building, a tax incentive to redo their building. And we can do that in one of 2 ways. If they're historic buildings, we can make direct grants to the buildings. If they are non-historic buildings, we can make loans to the buildings that they get paid back over time. And those loans can be structured anyway. There's nothing in state legislation that says how those loans get structured. So, city council and your committees get to decide how those loans get structured, and the administration gets to decide that.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have bare ground, it's in this district. Obviously, there's nothing historic there because it's bare ground.
Yep.
Somebody went in and they wanted to develop. They wanted to put a business, what have you, on this empty lot.
Yep.
We could only, as a municipality, we could only loan them money. But you just said the terms of that loan are not set by the legislature. So we could loan them money at 0% interest, use the TIF money to pay back the loan?
Correct.
Okay. So in essence, you are giving them a grant.
You could give them, I mean, there's nothing in the state statutes that says you couldn't do 0% and do a forgivable loan if you wanted to do that.
Okay.
You know, that's the fine details in the statute.
What about what happens if, same scenario, bare ground, somebody builds and it's not successful and they close up shop, resells, what happens to the loan?
Well, it depends how that loan.
Does the city then have a lien on the property or like a bank would?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you negotiate that deal. But potentially, if you make a loan to them and you know, let's say it's for $500,000, right? And the building, they don't fill the spaces, they go bankrupt, they're not paying taxes on it. You have the lien on the property. You could, so you have a lien on the property. Anybody that takes that property has to pay that lien. Anybody that buys that property has to pay that lien. The city, if the city makes a loan directly to them, obviously the city has an obligation to pay that if the DRD revenues do not make up, are not able to pay the loan. But yeah, that's how that would work.
Special assessment.
Well, the reason I asked, I know that there were some properties 20, 30 years ago that Greenville Improvement Corporation or whatever, under what guys loaned the monies and then they closed up and they went away and then the funds dried up in that area and then you know you want to continue to put the funds back in.
Right.
Am I right on that, Eric? That there are examples of that in the past?
You know, and that's just one thing you could do. You can also take the money, the city can take the money and do public infrastructure. You can do it on a year-by-year basis rather than, you know, figuring out over time what you're gonna generate. It really depends on what you want to do and what kind of risk you want to take as a city with the money. You know, that's obviously that's something that we, as in the process, as the economic development process, the plan, we you know, we figure out and decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do with the money.
Sir,
Yes.
where does the seed money come from? Us, the city, or?
There's no true seed money. I mean, what kind of seed money?
Okay, we make a loan. What are we making a loan with?
The city would either have to borrow the money or would have to use its own capital to make that.
So the city's acting as a middleman.
Correct. Correct.
And we have reporting to do to the state annually.
Yep. Every year you file a report that you have to report what the capital investment is and any jobs that have been created in the district. That's really the extent of it. It's not the state they have no ability to shut down the district or anything like that. It's purely a reporting.
Is this program going to be ongoing? I mean, does this program, I
Does it
guess, is
sunset?
from the state, does
Yep.
it have a time frame to it?
It does. The district itself, when we set them up, we can do a 70%. I talked about the 70%. So 70% of the increase, we can do it for 10 years without getting school board approval. We have to notify them, but we don't have to get their approval. We can go out to 30 years, 70% for 30 years, and get school board approval. So that's the time frame.
Tyler, are you asking that question or are you asking?
Well,
the question?
he kinda
How long would
halfway
this
answered
program
it.
be around?
Yes.
There's no sunset to the provision. There's no in the DRD statute. There's no sunset that says in 2040 the program's going to end. There are like the enterprise zone program, if you're familiar with that.
There's other similar type programs been around for years, correct?
There's nothing that allows you to take real property tax,
Right.
and redirect it back into private properties. You can't do that there's no means to do that today. You can do a TIF. You can take TIFs and use increase in property taxes and put them back into infrastructure. You can do that, but there's no program like this that allows for historic preservation to use for public and private buildings.
Now, is there anything it was announced and it was supposed to be on the news yesterday, Dayton with the downtown arcade, they were going to do some funding, and is this similar to what they're doing or
I don't believe they're using a DRD. They are, I'm trying to remember the
It was
details.
historic preservation of some sort.
I think they're using historic tax credits. They got historic tax credits and new market tax credits, which you could do on top of the DRD. You can combine the DRD with other programs. The owners of building could combine it with historic tax credits, with new market tax credits, with Jobs Ohio loans, whatever CDBG funds. You could combine them with all those to make the project happen.
The taxes you're reallocating, are they strictly the city's portion?
No, it's all the taxes that are
The
generated.
school portion, everything?
Yep. Right.
And normally this is a work session of just the council ask questions. But if you have an intelligent question, I will allow them.
Try to come up with it.
You know, if you just have a comment, and this is for anyone, if the comment's just gonna be, I don't like it, I don't wanna do it, keep it to yourself. But if you have a serious question, and that would come from the media also, please. Okay?
I won't answer any questions, and I'll make, you can tell me if they're intelligent questions or not.
Well, let's see, if it comes from this, no.
Yeah. What's the downside? I mean, it sounds too good, so therefore, is it?
Well, there's a downside. I talked about the risk. There's a risk if you decide to make loans to the property owners and those developments, fall apart. There's a risk of the city having to back up those funds. That's a risk.
So if we borrowed the money to do that, then we would have to be paying somebody.
Right. That's one of the downside risks.
It depends on, and we'd have to go at the committee meeting to discuss on how this would be funded. But I believe, you could look at similar ways of maybe a little seed money on how we do the CIP. We could look at, if there's any other funds generated that we've been paying in the past that no longer, maybe can move. There's a lot of different things we could probably look at.
And we do
But it'd
have
be
a CIC, so what could be their involvement with this?
They could be the you can use 20% of the increase of the property taxes can go back to an entity like a CIC to run the DRD, to run the economic development plan.
And I think when you look at the comments that have been made about the infrastructure and public works and things like that, we've been very creative on how we use our funds that come from those line items with the water and sewer and whatnot. I think that's one reason why Kurt, you probably brought this, is because you looked at, we can add this to some of that type of matching and.
This is another tool in your economic development toolbox. Nate's probably gonna get in here at the end, what his company would charge the city of Greenville to get this established, but once it's established, it's established. It's very similar to an enterprise zone, it's very similar to a CRA, which this council, 5 or 6 years ago, amended their CRA and expanded to offer economic development incentives. Like Nate said, this is an economic development tool for our downtown, though, that revolves around preserving historic buildings. It just allows for maybe more investment in our downtown. Now, I understand that there's a risk associated with it. If we choose not to do this, and we could get fortunate enough that an individual would come similar to that of the Merchant House and increase the property value of a building, we'll just take what we could get and go with it. We don't have to give it back. We can put that into public infrastructure. We can do things to upgrade the downtown. We can replace the pavers that are desperately in need of paving. But if we wanted to assume some risk, we could venture to help investors financially and use this money to recoup those loans, if you will. If we choose not to use it in that sense of using that money to invest in our buildings downtown, and we just simply want to keep the money for ourselves to improve the infrastructure, I think it's going to take a little bit longer to get the return on your investment, just simply because you're going to wait for that next person to come along and have the wherewithal to make a major investment in your downtown. You may just get
little bits and pieces here and there as property values. But there has to be a set project, is that correct? I mean, it's not gonna, you're not gonna just get TIF money over, or based upon like property value increases over time.
We can do it one of two ways. We can set it up where it's a second. We can set it up where we set up the DRD in that 10 acres, and it starts, you know, January 1st of 2018, and all the property tax increases in that district go into the DRD, and you use them for all the purposes, right? Or you can set it per project. It's just it's dependent on, as we go through the process and you go through the economic development plan, what makes most sense.
Can different districts be set up different ways?
Yes.
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 There must be at least a half a dozen good locations that, on that map, if you would please return my map to me, please.
$1.
Yeah, I'll waive the fee. So one area could be historic preservation. One area could be, let's say, is totally vacant right now. And it fell within a 10-acre area, so it could be whatever some developer wanted to put in there.
Yeah. I mean, you'd obviously have discretion as a city,
Yeah, but I mean, it's not so narrow confined as to say it's only going to be for historic. It's only going to be for something that should be historic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a historic preservation tool, but the real value is it's a development incentive, as Kurt talked about. It's an economic development incentive to get those developers or building owners to invest in their buildings. That's really what it is.
This is for businesses. It's not for individual homes or anything, correct?
No, it's not. We can't use the revenues to go back into a residential property.
Okay.
Now we could generate revenues from residential properties, but we can't have them go back into the residential.
And are any housing, or if somebody's doing
any housing, you could if you wanted to. I mean, I don't know. We've talked a little bit, but you could have it go down a residential street, and the values in that residential street could generate a certain amount of money that goes into the DRD. We couldn't put that revenue back into those homes, but it would generate revenue for the DRD.
But you could put it back into the
streets,
the curbs, the sidewalks.
That's right.
So, and I don't know if Mr. Tryon was going this direction with this question, but to take it a step further, what happens if you have a mixed-use building? What happens if you have a commercial business on the first floor, but residential on the top? Is that apartment still considered commercial?
No, the apartment's considered residential. So the revenues, so in that instance, let's say it's a 4-story building, and you generate $1 million in new revenue off of it, right, over a certain amount of time. We can use all that $1 million on the first floor. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say we have an existing business downtown.
Yeah.
4 stories. I'm not going to name any names, but it's got a deli at the bottom and a candy store but the upper floors have been vacant for 3 years, but they used to be offices and then residential.
Yep.
How are you going to? Those are existing buildings. How just through the increase of taxes you're going to value it more, or where's $1 million coming from?
It'd be. I mean, if that building owner decided to put residential units in the top 3 floors, that's going to generate new revenue going to generate new value to the building. It's going to generate new property taxes.
But we can't loan them any money for those residential.
Not for the residential units, but we could loan them for the facade improvements to the whole building. We could loan it for parking in the back. Yeah, you could, absolutely. As long as it doesn't go into the actual apartment, it could go towards the parking related to the apartments.
Could it go to upgrades of if there was an elevator in the building?
Yeah, we could do that, because that's for the whole building. Mm-hmm. So there's different things you can do. It just can't go directly into the unit.
Yes.
Okay, so what protects you against the entity filing a BOR on their value?
There's nothing.
Okay. Is that what, of course?
You want to explain what that is?
Okay, so someone that has property that's fixed it up and they put $1 million in it, and they say, hey, it's only worth $300,000, and they argue, take the border revisions and argue the value down to whatever they argue it to, and that portion of taxes that's being generated is reduced proportionally. So you would have a longer duration to be paid back, and that.
But you'd also, if that, you know, in that case, then the city has the ability to negotiate with that owner and say, you're only going to, you said it was $1 million, but then you negotiated with the BOR down to 300,000. So you only get value based on that 300,000.
As far as the loan.
Yeah,
Right, but they do this after you've already made the money's out the door.
I understand, but you can still go back and renegotiate. You know, you can. It's like anything. You could still, the council still has the ability to amend that original agreement if something like that happens.
Would you be able to put is there a provision in the contract that you provide, you said you would provide legal?
A development agreement? Yeah, you could put that in there.
Okay.
Right.
TIF, you have to maintain this value for a period of time, and this would be, I don't know if you did the same thing. The other thing, are the schools held harmless as far as the valuation?
No, they're not.
Portion? Okay.
They're not. This is so it's a 70% of all new values is going into the DRD. The other 30% goes to the places that it already goes to. But you know, the schools aren't getting they're not getting that value today. So it's kind of a win for both.
Just for council's information, that Board of Revisions, you know, an example of that would be, it happened here. We had a major retailer that came to the city. Then they expanded, and then they went to a Board of Revisions, and they actually got the value of the property after the expansion down less than what it was when they originally built it. And so there was a big reduction in their property taxes.
But you know, if you could, if that happens, if you go, they negotiate the value down. You can put a special assessment of property to cover all the expenses of the loan. I mean, there's other things you can do as well. Protect the city.
Moving on.
Great. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to move through these next 3 slides, 9, 10, and 11. I'm going to move through them quick because I want to talk about number 11 the most. As part of this process, this is a tax incentive tool. It's an economic development tool, but it's also an economic development plan for your downtown or for any of the areas we choose. So the Montrose Group strategic plan away is we have our learn, listen, and do approach. We do the same thing for these plans. Our learn phase in the DRD process, the learning phase, is what we're talking about here. What parcels are going to be included? What parcels aren't going to be included? We look at the economy of Greenville and Darke County. We look at the economy of Ohio, how that's going to impact the DRD. That's our learn phase. The listen phase is we do, and that's on slide 10, is stakeholder meetings. So we meet with whoever you know, it's decided we should meet with, but we talk with council, with your CIC, we talk with building owners downtown, we talk with developers, we talk with people that are going to have a vested interest in what goes on in this area. And then we take that learning phase and we put it into the doing phase. Now, the doing phase is the action plan. There's 2 things that come out of that. The first thing that comes out of that is just really the DRD plan. What you're going to use the money for, how much revenue may be generated in the DRD, what the parcels are going to look like, those kind of things. The other thing we do in the action plan is through that learning phase and that listening phase, there are other things that we may bubble up to say, okay, you also need to do these 2 things to help your downtown. We're doing, I mentioned that in Logan, Ohio, which is the Hocking Hills area, we're doing a DRD plan. They have, you know, they're a downtown that's an old downtown. They went from lots of manufacturing to hardly any manufacturing today, and it's all been replaced by tourism. But what they need more than anything is funds to help business owners start businesses, restaurants, shops, those kind of things. So in their plan, they have a community investment fund that's going to be a combination of foundation dollars, bank dollars, and private individuals that are going to come together and help businesses start businesses. That's outside of the DRD. And that's something that we will do in your plan as well, is give you other thoughts for what should be done in the downtown. Well, you have a downtown business association, a Main Street association. We will work with all those groups to say, okay, what else should you be doing? What other things, are there zoning changes that need to happen to allow for, you know, residential in the upper stories? is there this community investment fund? Are there other things that need to be done that can complement the DRD? So that's what we do in the action plan. So not only is this a DRD plan for you, an economic development incentive, but we also give you other strategic planning tools for your downtown. So it becomes a downtown revitalization plan for you that you can use not only the DRD, but the other ideas that are formulated through the plan to give you other thoughts about other things that can be done. So it's not just for the DRD. Kurt mentioned our fee. We to do this plan, and we presented the mayor and Kurt with and I think maybe some of you have seen it, but our fee is $20,000 to do the plan. It takes us 4 to 5 months from start to finish to do that. So you pay the $20,000 over that time, and at the end of the day, you get this DRD economic development plan. You get all the legislation. We take you through that. We do the public hearings with you and all those kind of things. So that's our fee and how we kind of do things.
With that fee, how available are you to council if they want to have a meeting and want?
I'm as available as you need me to be. I think that's the best way to put it. I'm available for phone calls and emails and meetings. We can get people here and I'm as available as you need me to be.
So on page 5.
Yes.
One of the things that you said in the 5-step process
Yep.
that you would help us with are the DRD agreements.
Mhm.
These agreements obviously aren't all going to happen at the same time.
Right.
So I guess my question to you is, for what period of time are you at our mercy to help us in creating these agreements and working with before it would become more of a consulting?
Yeah,
consulting
we
effort?
would. That's a good question, Kurt. So what we would do is during the process and during that DRD process, we would help you put together those agreements. After that's done, after the municipality, after it's all in place, then what we would do is if there's agreements after that, we would enter into a consulting agreement that's an hourly fee or something like that going forward. So
There may not be any agreements in the
right. I mean, that's we would. And I'd have to think through that because we haven't done any agreements yet, and it's just because the ones that we've done, they haven't used the agreements. But we'll have to think through that and kind of see how
10
we.
years sounds good.
Absolutely, yeah. For you guys, that'd be great. I don't know about for me.
Okay, so you have a
wanna say
10-acre
5.
development someplace. Does someone within that development, can they just not participate?
They cannot participate. Yes, we can. This is the parcels that go into the DRD. They get notification. The owners of those parcels get notification that's going to be in the DRD, but they don't have to be a part of it. They don't have to vote on it. If their property, if their value goes up, it may go into the DRD and be used in the DRD. It will be an incentive to any building owner that they're in the DRD for them to either do something with their building or sell it to somebody to do something with their building. So, but there's no really for them. There's no negative. There's nothing negative to a building owner
No one's
to be in
being
it.
forced into a corner or a box.
No, because they're not. It's not like zoning or anything like that, right? So if you're in the DRD, it's an advantage to you to be in the DRD. Not a disadvantage. There's no reason.
Everyone pays property taxes, right? So if we could set this development district up that you as a city council do not have to make loans. You do not have to spend any money in helping individuals invest in properties. It's something that you can do, but not something you have to do. If I heard Nate right, what he just said was if we set up this district, any form of improvement or any increase in property taxes, 70% of that would go into the special fund to be used for however those things that it can be used for.
And it might be used for different things in different.
Right. But there might
10-acre
come an
lots.
opportunity where an individual, that it would be a good partnership to work with somebody. And we have this tool available that if the circumstances are right, that we can move forward with it.
Kurt, with what I've been listening, we would probably want to concentrate on an area that is backed up or could be connected to a business area, correct?
Well, it has to. I mean, I
So-
don't follow
so-
what you're saying.
That one property over at the corner of Vine and 4th Street, West 4th. Nice big home, historic home. There's really no business around it until you get back up 4th Street a few blocks. And again, we're already in that district, so we really wouldn't use that home as an anchor.
No.
But if we used the Broadway Bridge and the mausoleum and the Garst, we could take that area of North Broadway and really incorporate it quite a bit there.
Yes, that North Broadway was one of the areas that we targeted.
If we used Lansdowne House or something, right there, and you configured the 10 acres right, we'd have more available on East Main Street, where there are blocks of businesses and then residential blocks of businesses, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
One of the things we wanted to hit key areas. Obviously, there's some vacant land that could possibly be used for commercial purposes. We tried to stretch it, and we really need to go back and look at it. Nate talked about continuous versus contiguous, and trying to stretch far enough to include the small industrial area and where the your employer is at. And I'm Feldner, so all I can think of is
Integrity Way.
Integrity Way.
This seems a bit far out.
Well, but what you have to if we take only the right of way and not include the parcels, so you're just taking a little bit to get to the certain area that you want to target, it's permissible. So that was, but it may be too far away. But those are the types of areas that we're looking at. North Broadway, obviously, where all of Broadway, there's potential for redevelopment. We would like to, if given the opportunity, we'll sit down with Nate and we will strategically put together what these districts can look like.
Council, I don't know, I'm kind of a news junkie, and thank you for getting my computer fixed, because I can get back on my papers. But, I mentioned the news earlier about the arcade in downtown Dayton. But also on tonight's news, they were doing a special of St. Mary's, and how the city of St. Mary's has been assisting property owners, or they've been doing it themselves, buying properties instead of tearing them down and rehabbing them, and they opened up 2 or 3 this week. A couple weeks ago, the Mechanicsburg, they were taking the mayor and they were talking about this building's falling down, that bricks. Here you had one community that is a county seat, much like us, and then you have another one that's not a county seat. One's got a clear direction, the other one's like, we want something to happen here, but we just don't know what to do. Then I look at Bluffton, which is in Allen County, and it is linked with a university there, a small university, and they've actually expanded upon their downtown district. It would be comparable to for sales, and they've got too much new business coming in almost with the redevelopment, but they've tied that in with a program that also has an education portion, so new business owners can go through a program on how to run a business, how to do everything to be successful, and then there's some mentorship that goes along with funding, and those are ways that can be done. I know Kurt's mentioned some. We know that recently Versailles started a program. And a lot of their for sales program is what to do with the upstairs. We've had, our Main Street has had Friday night, First Fridays, and they've toured upstairs. But there's a couple developed areas, and then there's the rest of it is look like it used to be. And we've got some neat opportunities there that we can look at. So I think this is a viable tool that we could use in the future for development. I've had a strong interest in revitalization since I was on council back in the 90s on how to develop, especially with the use of, we've got a lot of small parking lots that are parceled here and there, how they could be put together. And the owners still be able to retain their parking, but it could be a much more useful area, especially when it comes to the farmer's market or downtown events and things like that.
This whole thing sounds good. It almost sounds too good. That's why I was questioning, what's the downside, what's the potential for. But it sounds like the city could be in control of at least how much money we're borrowing to lend out. What areas might be best suited for this, just not, throwing 10 acres to everything. Because there's a few places here that just don't really make sense, but there's a few places that make a lot of sense.
It sounds too good to be true because he's a great salesman. But in all honesty, and we haven't heard any, things from the Ohio Attorney General that it's a scam, so we're okay.
Well, and that's the, you're right. We know the Attorney General well, so we're not going to go anything and do that. We wrote his economic development book, so this program's new as well. I mean, that's one of the things that it was passed last summer. It went into effect last September, so it is a new program. The reason that it was done was for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton. If you've read anything about what's happening over in Canton with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they're going to spend $75 to $100 million to renovate the Hall of Fame museum. It hasn't been renovated. I mean, they changed the displays, but the actual building itself, they haven't done anything with it, I think, since it opened. So what's happening is that around that, there's $500 million of private investment. And so what they did, this actually was a Michigan law. They said, we want to be able to take that increase in taxes from that private development and funnel it back into redoing the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So that's where it came from, and that's that's the value of it. That's big scale, but you can certainly take that and use that here for the same kind of thing.
Well, when we look at and I've been approached by different individuals, whether they're in the city or out of the city. I passed them on, interested in property for development for this or that. I know the city gets it quite a bit, but we're looking at, you go down to the end of Broadway and look what's there. We got a couple thrift stores and then everything else is vacant. All the way to the shopping center that was there, which you look at the shopping center, boy, if we could put that in there or this in there. We've got vacant land that's around there. We're getting, the other day I started counting and I just lost count. When you look at our downtown business district and you see that a lot of the storefronts are now more office fronts. They're not retail. We're losing that. And I think we need to develop a little bit more on that, and this could help with that. You're going to bring in a certain type of business who you can control what's coming in. The facades, we know we've got the program already on Broadway, but they need a little assistance in being able to help keep the facades up to today. We're looking at improvements to sidewalks and street and curbs in certain areas. A program that we're trying to get through the last couple of years. Hopefully we'll get something accomplished yet this year, to improve it, but we could add that to it, and those things enhance the property value. So why not be able to take advantage of that enhanced property value and put it back in? So I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I think, Kurt, I'm not sure where you came up with all this information or how, but I'm glad you brought it to us.
Thanks. Actually, Nate Mike Bowers met Nate at a conference, or
no, well, he heard us give this presentation. Mike did at a conference, but I was at Jobs Ohio in 2011, so I worked with Mike on a couple projects when he was mayor. That's how I got to know Mike.
Yeah, but we're going to give Kurt the credit now.
Give him all the credit. Mike's not even here.
That's right.
He left us.
Exactly.
I know. Did you have anything to do, I think it was Akron, was that the presentation we had at the Ohio Municipal League, similar to this, I think it was Akron was able to do something similar to this to tie the university into business district and rehabilitate areas with.
I wasn't involved in that presentation. It's very possible that that's what they used. It's possible.
Okay.
I don't know who gave that.
I just don't remember.
Who did it?
Is there any other questions or comments from the council? I think that what we have now would probably wait till the next meeting, but whether this council would want to refer this to committee to study whether we should fund this, or if you just want to go ahead and have legislation prepared for a later date.
That's a decision we can't make.
We're not going to make tonight, but that's something for us to consider and look at on the July 11th.
I find it very favorable.
Favorable for committee or favorable
For committee.
or just to have legislation prepared? To
Like I said.
Kurt, what would you say would be a good
Sounds
time to
good.
start enacting this, if we were to do it?
We're not gonna talk about this and make a decision until July. You're 5 to 6 months out on preparing it, so if you made the decision to move forward, it's not going to be enacted before 2018.
18,
So,
which is another budget year,
well, if you decided to move forward with it, you're gonna fund
You're going to fund
You're
the
gonna
study
fund
this year.
20,000 this year, and you're not going to be able to have the districts established before 2018.
I will take any comments from the,
I find it to be very interesting. Would there be any public input as far as you have no limit on the number of quantities of districts, right? So,
Right. And I think, Jeff, that's where we get into when, as they're developing the plan, before it's submitted to the state, to listen, when we engage the public, those that, property owners who have already made the investment in our downtown, definitely would want to have that dialogue to make this the best, so that it benefits the investors, so that it benefits the city of Greenville.
But if you have a historic building that's not contiguous with the downtown, that's totally separate, but is it budding business, you can utilize that too, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
And we can reap the benefit of residential development. We just cannot inject them into residential,
Correct.
except for infrastructure,
You could put it into
other
infrastructure.
than you can do streets,
Yep.
curbs, sidewalks.
sidewalks,
Correct.
which would enhance the properties of those
Yeah.
residentials anyway. We could take it right down 4th Street to the big houses, big old. That was a joke, you don't type that in. Any other comments?
Do we need to do it as a committee, or can it be done
it can be done.
as a whole?
Well, I think
That'll be
we're,
my question on July 11th.
yeah, and I think that by July 11th, the auditor will have a better idea of where our funds are, and where we would come from. I'm not gonna put her on the spot tonight.
No, never.
I would.
So we decided to put this on committee?
No, not till July 11th.
Yeah, okay.
I'll ask the auditor if she has anything to comment.
No.
Law director? Anyone else? I appreciate everyone here. The media, do you have either of you a comment on record, or you wanna, don't you go anywhere?
Okay.
Eh,
I was late, so I got to stay longer.
Well, if you're smart, you'll say that, if they take you to the maid right, you'll talk to them all night.
Yeah. Or the merchant house.
I only need
Move we
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn?
motion to adjourn. Call Call the roll. By Mr. Rogers.
Rogers?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Tryon?
Yes.
Godwin?
Yes.
Hensley? Hottishell?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Just a
All right.
reminder for anyone that wants to go
Thank
to
you.
the finance meeting tomorrow.
Absolutely. How things going?
And ad hoc meeting